I'm Jessica Thompson, 29, and I'll never forget the moment my father looked me dead in the eye at our family Thanksgiving dinner and screamed that I was a worthless waste of space who'd never amount to anything. What he didn't know was that hidden in my jacket pocket was my official NASA Mission Specialist badge, confirming my selection for the Mars exploration program. 3 years of avoiding family gatherings, a lifetime of being dismissed as the disappointment daughter, and countless nights wondering if maybe he was right about me, all led to that one explosive moment when I finally had enough. The silence that followed his cruel words gave me the perfect opportunity to pull out that badge and watch his face crumble as he realized his biggest failure wasn't me, but his complete inability to recognize the daughter who'd literally reached for the stars. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Clearwater, Texas wasn't exactly the launching pad most people would expect for a future NASA mission specialist. Our small town of 25,000 people was built on traditional values, blue-collar work ethic, and the unshakable belief that success meant staying close to home, starting a family young, and following the path your parents had walked before you. My father, Robert Thompson, owned Thompson Construction, a company he'd built from nothing, with his bare hands and an abundance of stubborn determination. He was proud of his calloused palms, his fleet of work trucks, and most importantly, his ability to provide for his family through honest physical labor. My mother, Linda, taught third grade at Clearwater Elementary, a job she'd held for over 20 years, and seemed perfectly content to continue until retirement. Together, they represented everything their community valued: stability, tradition, and the wisdom to know your place in the world. I was the middle child in a family where birth order seemed to determine destiny. My older brother Michael had always been the golden son, the one who played varsity football, dated the homecoming queen, and seamlessly transitioned from high school hero to successful local businessman. Even as adults, Mike continued to embody everything my father admired. He managed the largest car dealership in 3 counties, lived in a beautiful house just 10 minutes from our childhood home, and had blessed my parents with 2 perfect grandsons who carried on the Thompson name. Mike understood his role in the family ecosystem and played it flawlessly, never questioning the expectations or dreaming beyond the boundaries of our small-town limits. Then there was me, the daughter who never quite fit the mold my parents had envisioned. From the earliest age, I was drawn to things that existed far beyond the borders of Clearwater. While other little girls played with dolls and dreamed of weddings, I spent hours lying on our back porch, staring up at the night sky, wondering what lay beyond those distant points of light. I devoured every book our small library had about space exploration, memorized the names of astronauts, and built elaborate rocket ships out of cardboard boxes and aluminum foil. My parents initially found this phase endearing, the way adults humor children's temporary obsessions, but as years passed and my fascination only deepened, their tolerance began wearing thin. School became my sanctuary and my battlefield simultaneously. I excelled in mathematics and science with an ease that both thrilled and worried my teachers. While my classmates struggled with basic algebra, I was teaching myself calculus from books I'd ordered online with money earned from babysitting neighborhood kids. My physics teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, recognized something special and encouraged me to enter science fairs, apply for advanced programs, and consider prestigious universities for college. Each achievement, each award, each recognition should have been a source of family pride, but instead, they seemed to create a growing chasm between me and my parents. My father's reactions to my academic success ranged from benign neglect to active discouragement. When I won the regional science fair with a project demonstrating orbital mechanics, he muttered something about me being too smart for my own good and suggested I might want to focus on more practical skills. When I scored a perfect 1600 on my SATs, he questioned why I'd wasted time on a test that had nothing to do with real life. Most painfully, when I received early acceptance to MIT with a full scholarship, he spent the entire dinner explaining why college was a waste of time and money, especially for girls who would just end up getting married and having babies anyway. The contrast in how my parents treated my achievements versus Mike's was stark and undeniable. When Mike made the regional sales team at his dealership, my father threw him a celebration dinner and invited half the town. When I published a research paper on propulsion systems as a high school senior, earning recognition from NASA's Educational Outreach Program, my parents forgot to even mention it to our extended family. Mike's every minor accomplishment was amplified and celebrated, while my major achievements were either ignored or actively minimized. My mother's role in this dynamic was perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of my childhood. I could see in her eyes that she was proud of my intelligence and accomplishments, but she never found the courage to advocate for me against my father's dismissive attitude. She would occasionally sneak me extra books about space exploration or quietly help me with college application essays, but these small acts of support always came with the implicit understanding that they must remain secret. Linda Thompson had learned long ago that keeping peace in the household meant deferring to her husband's opinions, even when those opinions were crushing their daughter's spirit. The message I received throughout my formative years was crystal clear. My dreams were impractical, my ambitions were selfish, and my intelligence was more of a character flaw than a gift. My father seemed to view my interest in aerospace engineering as a personal rejection of everything he valued. To him, my desire to work in space exploration wasn't just unrealistic, it was an insult to the practical, earthbound life he'd built for our family. He saw my academic pursuits as evidence that I thought I was better than him, better than our town, better than the life that had been good enough for generations of Thompsons before me. Despite the lack of family support, I refused to abandon my dreams. I worked part-time jobs throughout high school, saving every penny for college expenses my scholarship wouldn't cover. I spent countless hours researching aerospace programs, writing essays, and preparing for interviews. When other teenagers were enjoying typical social activities, I was studying advanced mathematics and physics, determined to build the academic foundation necessary for my chosen career. The loneliness was overwhelming at times, but I held on to the vision of someday working for NASA, contributing to humanity's exploration of space, and proving that the weird little girl from Clearwater, Texas had something valuable to offer the world. The day I left for MIT, my parents drove me to the airport, in relative silence. My father's parting words were a warning that I'd probably come running home within a year when I realized how tough the real world could be. My mother hugged me tightly and whispered that she loved me, but even her emotional goodbye felt tinged with doubt about whether I was making the right choice. As I boarded the plane to Boston, carrying 2 suitcases and a heart full of determination, I made a silent promise to myself that I would succeed, not just despite my family's lack of support, but because of it. College was a revelation in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who shared my passion for science and space exploration. My professors didn't think I was too ambitious. They thought I wasn't ambitious enough. My classmates didn't find my career goals unrealistic. They found them inspiring. In the supportive environment of MIT, I finally began to understand that the problem hadn't been with my dreams, but with the limited vision of those around me back home. I threw myself into my studies with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. Aerospace engineering was challenging beyond anything I'd experienced, but every difficult concept mastered, every complex problem solved, every successful project completed felt like a small victory against the voices from home that had told me I was reaching too high. I graduated summa cum laude with a specialization in propulsion systems and immediately applied to NASA's competitive astronaut candidate program. The selection process for NASA was grueling, involving multiple rounds of interviews, psychological evaluations, physical fitness tests, and technical assessments. Thousands of highly qualified candidates applied, but only a handful would be chosen. Throughout the months of evaluation, I thought often about my father's dismissive predictions and my mother's worried expressions. Part of me wondered if they might be right, if a small-town girl from Texas really had any business dreaming of space exploration. When the call came informing me that I'd been selected as a NASA astronaut candidate, I sat alone in my small apartment and cried for 30 minutes straight. 4 years of intensive training lay ahead, but I had taken the first step toward achieving everything I'd dreamed of since childhood. My first instinct was to call my family and share the incredible news, but something held me back. I realized I wasn't ready to have my achievement minimized or dismissed, wasn't prepared to hear my father explain why this opportunity was somehow less impressive than Mike's latest sales award. Instead, I called my college roommate Rachel Martinez, who had become my closest friend and strongest supporter. Rachel had also been accepted into the NASA program, and we celebrated together, two young women who had refused to let anyone else's limited vision define their possibilities. That night, we promised each other that we would succeed not just for ourselves, but for every little girl who had ever been told her dreams were too big, too impractical, too ambitious for someone like her. The 4 years of astronaut training at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston were the most challenging and rewarding of my life. I learned to operate in zero gravity, studied every system on the International Space Station, practiced emergency procedures until they became second nature, and worked alongside some of the most brilliant minds in aerospace engineering. The training was designed to push candidates to their absolute limits, testing not just technical knowledge but psychological resilience, physical endurance, and the ability to perform under extreme pressure. Throughout this period, my contact with my family remained minimal and surface level. I would call home on holidays and birthdays, sharing basic updates about my work without going into detail about my achievements or growing responsibilities. My parents seemed content with this arrangement, treating my NASA job as though it were some sort of extended graduate school program that would eventually end with me returning home to pursue more practical endeavors. They never asked detailed questions about my work, never expressed curiosity about my daily responsibilities, and never acknowledged the historic significance of what I was accomplishing. Meanwhile, every conversation included detailed updates about Mike's continued success in the car business, his children's achievements in Little League and school plays, and my father's growing pride in his son's ability to provide for his family and contribute meaningfully to the community. The implicit message was always the same. Mike was building something real and valuable while I was pursuing an expensive hobby that would eventually run its course. The breakthrough moment came during my final year of training when I was selected for the Mars Exploration Mission crew. This wasn't just any assignment. It was the opportunity to be among the first humans to set foot on another planet, to make history on a scale that few people ever experience. The selection process had been incredibly competitive, involving candidates from around the world, and being chosen represented the absolute pinnacle of achievement in aerospace exploration. When Dr. Sarah Chen, our mission director, called me into her office to deliver the news, I felt the same overwhelming emotions I'd experienced when first accepted into the astronaut program, only magnified tenfold. This was the realization of every dream I'd ever harbored, the vindication of every sacrifice I'd made, the proof that the little girl staring up at the stars from her back porch in Clearwater had been right to believe in possibilities beyond her small town's imagination. The mission would launch in 18 months following extensive additional training and preparation. Media attention would be intense, public interest enormous, and the historical significance undeniable. For the first time since leaving home for college, I felt a powerful urge to share this achievement with my family, to finally bridge the gap that had grown between us over the years. But as I sat in my apartment that evening, holding the official notification letter and fingering the mission specialist badge that represented my new status, I realized I wasn't ready for another dismissive conversation or lukewarm response to what represented the greatest achievement of my life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Instead, I made a different decision. I would return home for Thanksgiving, the first time in 3 years, and I would tell them in person. I would look my father in the eye and share the news that his disappointment daughter was about to make history by traveling to Mars. The decision felt both terrifying and necessary. For too long, I had allowed my family's lack of support to keep me away from home, to create distance that served no one's interests. It was time to confront the dynamics that had shaped my childhood, and either repair the relationship or accept that it couldn't be salvaged. Either way, I needed to stop running from the pain of feeling unseen and unvalued by the people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders. As I made arrangements to return to Clearwater for Thanksgiving, I carried with me not just the mission specialist badge, but years of accumulated hurt, disappointment, and the deep hope that maybe, finally, my family would see me for who I had become rather than who they had always assumed I would be. The little girl who had once dreamed of touching the stars was coming home as a woman who was about to make that dream reality, and it was time for everyone to understand exactly what that meant. The flight from Houston to Dallas felt both endless and too short, giving me time to rehearse conversations that might never happen while my stomach churned with anticipation and dread. I hadn't been home for Thanksgiving in 3 years, not since the last disastrous family gathering, when my father spent the entire meal comparing my NASA salary unfavorably to Mike's commission earnings and questioning when I planned to settle down and start contributing something meaningful to society. That particular evening had ended with me leaving before dessert was served, driving back to Houston in tears and vowing never to subject myself to that humiliation again. Yet here I was, making the same drive down Interstate 45 toward Clearwater, watching familiar landmarks blur past my rental car windows. The NASA badge felt heavy in my jacket pocket, a tangible reminder of everything that had changed since I'd last made this journey. I'd practiced the reveal 100 times in my mind, imagining different scenarios and reactions, but nothing felt quite right. How do you tell your family that you've achieved something they've never even bothered to understand? How do you bridge a gap that's been widening for over a decade? The town itself looked exactly as I remembered it, which somehow made me feel like even more of an outsider. Main Street still featured the same collection of family-owned businesses that had operated since my childhood. Peterson's Hardware, where my father bought all his construction supplies. Mabel's Diner, where high school football victories were still celebrated with free pie, and the Clearwater Community Bank, where everyone knew your name and your business. Nothing ever really changed here, which I suppose was part of the appeal for people who valued stability and tradition above all else. Pulling into my parents' driveway felt like stepping back in time. The 2-story brick house looked immaculate, as always, with my mother's carefully maintained flower beds, and my father's perfectly edged lawn. Mike's truck was already parked out front, along with a minivan that must belong to his wife Ashley. I could hear children's laughter from the backyard, probably my nephews Tyler and Connor playing on the swing set my father had built for them last Christmas. The scene was picture-perfect Americana, the kind of life my parents had always envisioned for all their children. My mother appeared at the front door before I'd even finished unloading my overnight bag, her face lighting up with the same mixture of joy and worry she'd worn since my childhood. Linda Thompson had aged gracefully, though I noticed new lines around her eyes that spoke to years of mediating family tensions and swallowing her own opinions to keep the peace. She enveloped me in one of her signature hugs, the kind that lasted just long enough to convey everything she couldn't say out loud. "Jessica, honey, you look wonderful," she said, stepping back to examine me with a mother's critical eye. "Are you eating enough? You look thin. And your hair is different. I like it shorter. It's very professional." Her rapid-fire observations were typical, a nervous habit that intensified when she was trying to fill uncomfortable silences or avoid difficult topics. "Thanks, Mom. You look great too. Is everyone here already?" I glanced toward the sounds of family activity, steeling myself for the inevitable awkwardness of seeing relatives who had become virtual strangers over the years. "Mike and Ashley arrived this morning with the boys. Your father's in the garage working on something, you know how he is. Always has to have a project going." She linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the house, her touch gentle but protective. "I'm so glad you decided to come home this year. It hasn't been the same without you." The house smelled like my childhood, cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, coffee perpetually brewing, and the faint scent of my father's aftershave lingering in the hallways. Family photos lined the entryway walls, and I couldn't help but notice the progression of images over the years. There were plenty of pictures from my early childhood, but they became noticeably less frequent during my high school years, and virtually non-existent after I left for college. Meanwhile, Mike's section of the photo gallery had expanded dramatically, featuring his wedding, the births of his children, family vacations, and various business achievements. Aunt Jessie, 2 small tornadoes in the form of my nephews came barreling around the corner, their faces sticky with what appeared to be pie filling. Tyler, the older boy, had inherited Mike's confident demeanor and athletic build, while Connor was quieter but possessed the kind of mischievous intelligence that reminded me uncomfortably of myself at that age. "Hey guys, look how tall you've gotten." I knelt down to their level, genuinely happy to see them despite my complicated feelings about their parents. Children have a way of cutting through adult tension, with their unfiltered honesty and infectious enthusiasm. "Mom said you work for NASA," Tyler announced with the authority of an 8-year-old sharing breaking news. "Do you know any real astronauts?" Before I could answer, Ashley appeared from the kitchen, looking exactly like the Instagram influencer she'd become since marrying into the family. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite spending the morning with 2 young children, and her outfit managed to be both casual and carefully curated. She'd built a modest following, documenting her life as a small-town mom, complete with sponsored posts about everything from skincare routines to kitchen appliances. "Jessica! Oh my gosh, it's been forever!" Ashley's greeting was enthusiastic but felt rehearsed, like she was performing for an invisible audience. "You have to tell me all about your space job. Is it true you get to work with rockets? That's so cool!" I've been telling everyone at book club about my famous sister-in-law. The casual appropriation of my achievements for her social media content irritated me more than it should have, but I forced a smile and nodded. "Something like that. It's pretty technical, mostly computer work and training simulations. Still though, space, how exciting. Mike, come say hi to your sister." Ashley called toward the kitchen, where I could hear my brother's familiar laugh mixing with my father's deeper voice. Mike emerged carrying a beer and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that suggested he'd been holding court with stories about his latest business successes. At 32, he'd settled comfortably into middle age, his former athletic frame softened by good living, and his demeanor radiating the confidence of a man who'd never seriously questioned his place in the world. He was, in many ways, exactly who our father had hoped he would become. Well, look who finally decided to come home," Mike said, pulling me into a brief hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate. "Mom's been talking about this for weeks. Dad wasn't sure you'd actually show up." "Here I am," I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the obvious implication that my presence was somehow unexpected or unreliable. "Good timing, too. Dad's been in a great mood lately. The business is booming, Connor just scored his first goal in soccer, and Tyler made honor roll again. Lots to celebrate." Mike's summary of family news pointedly excluded any mention of my life or achievements, a pattern I'd grown accustomed to over the years. My father's voice boomed from the garage, calling for Mike to come help him with something. The sound of it sent a familiar chill down my spine, triggering memories of childhood conversations where his disappointment in me had been barely concealed beneath surface politeness. Robert Thompson had never been cruel exactly, but his ability to make me feel small and insignificant with just a tone of voice or dismissive gesture had shaped my self-perception in ways I was still working to overcome. "I should go say hello," I said, though every instinct told me to delay the inevitable awkwardness as long as possible. "He's in a good mood," my mother whispered encouragingly, as if his emotional state were something we all needed to monitor and accommodate. "The Hendersons just hired him for a big addition project, and he's excited about the work." The garage was my father's kingdom, organized with military precision and filled with the tools of his trade. Every implement had its designated place, every surface was spotless, and the concrete floor was painted a practical gray that showed no trace of oil stains or wear. It was a space that reflected his personality perfectly, functional, orderly, and completely masculine in the most traditional sense. He was bent over a workbench, studying blueprints for what appeared to be a deck renovation, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose in a way that made him look older than his 58 years. Mike stood beside him, pointing at something on the plans and nodding along with whatever explanation was being provided. It was a scene that could have been lifted from my childhood, father and son bonding over practical matters while I remained perpetually on the outside. "Dad?" I said quietly, not wanting to startle him but needing to announce my presence. He looked up slowly, his expression cycling through surprise, pleasure, and something that might have been wariness before settling into polite welcome. "Jessica, you made it after all. Your mother wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from work. I requested the time off weeks ago. It's good to see you, Dad." The formality between us felt heavy and sad, like we were distant relatives meeting at a funeral rather than father and daughter reuniting for a holiday. "You look tired," he observed, which was his way of expressing concern without actually being vulnerable. "That job of yours working you too hard? It keeps me busy, but I love what I do." I touched the badge in my pocket unconsciously, drawing strength from its presence. Well, that's something, I guess. Mike was just showing me the plans for his new deck. Going to add another 1,000 square feet to the house, increase the property value significantly. Smart investment. He turned back to the blueprints, effectively dismissing me while simultaneously highlighting Mike's practical achievements. Sounds great, I managed, feeling the familiar sting of being overlooked in favor of my brother's more tangible accomplishments. Dad's been helping me design the whole thing, Mike added, clearly enjoying the collaboration and the implied approval it represented. We're gonna start construction right after the holidays. Should be quite a project. I nodded and made appropriate noises of interest while feeling increasingly invisible. This was the dynamic I'd grown up with, father and son discussing real-world concerns while I stood by as an observer, my own life and achievements somehow less worthy of attention or discussion. The fact that I was literally helping design missions to explore other planets seemed irrelevant compared to deck construction and property values. You should come by when we start building, Mike offered, though his tone suggested he didn't expect me to take him up on the invitation. Might be interesting for you to see how real construction works. The casual dismissal of my engineering background as somehow less real than construction work hit exactly the nerve he'd probably intended. Mike had always been skilled at these subtle digs, comments that sounded supportive on the surface but carried unmistakable implications about my choices and their perceived value. I might do that, I replied evenly, refusing to rise to the bait. Dinner was announced before the conversation could become any more uncomfortable, and we all trooped inside to find my mother had outdone herself with the traditional Thanksgiving spread. The dining room table groaned under the weight of turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, and at least 3 different types of pie. It was a feast worthy of a magazine cover, perfect in every detail except for the underlying tension that seemed to permeate every family gathering. My father took his place at the head of the table, a position he'd occupied for as long as I could remember, while my mother bustled around making sure everyone had everything they needed. Mike and Ashley sat with their boys on one side, creating a picture of domestic bliss that my parents clearly found deeply satisfying. I took the remaining seat, feeling somewhat like a guest at my own family's table. Before we eat, I'd like to say a few words, my father announced, rising slightly from his chair in the ceremonial manner he adopted for important pronouncements. This has been a year of blessings for the Thompson family. Mike's business continues to thrive, the boys are excelling in school and sports, and Ashley's been doing wonderful things with her social media presence. I noticed that my presence at the table rated barely a mention in his gratitude speech, which shouldn't have surprised me but still stung. Here I was, literally days away from being announced as part of the first human mission to Mars, and I couldn't even merit inclusion in the family blessing. Most importantly, he continued, warming to his theme, we've got 2 grandsons who are growing up to be fine young men, carrying on the Thompson name with pride. Tyler's honor roll achievement and Connor's athletic success show they're learning the value of hard work and dedication. The irony was almost unbearable. My father was praising an 8-year-old's soccer goal while completely ignoring his daughter's selection for the most prestigious space mission in human history. The badge in my pocket seemed to burn against my chest, a physical reminder of everything he refused to see or acknowledge. And of course, he added as an obvious afterthought, it's nice to have Jessica home for the holidays. Family should be together when possible. The lukewarm inclusion felt worse than being ignored entirely. I was an afterthought, a checkbox to be marked off, rather than a daughter whose achievements deserved recognition. My mother caught my eye across the table and offered a small, sympathetic smile, but she remained silent as always when faced with my father's casual dismissal of my life. Conversation during the meal followed predictable patterns. Mike regaled everyone with stories from the car dealership, Ashley shared updates about her latest sponsored posts and growing follower count, and my father offered running commentary about local politics and business developments. My nephews chattered about school and friends, providing welcome breaks from the adult tension with their innocent observations and questions. Aunt Jessie, do you ever get to go to space? Connor asked during a lull in conversation, his young face serious with curiosity. Not yet, but maybe someday, I answered truthfully, acutely aware that I could have been more specific if I'd felt safe sharing my actual plans. That's enough space talk, my father interjected before anyone could follow up on Connor's question. Let's focus on things that are actually happening, not fantasy careers. The casual cruelty of dismissing my entire profession as a fantasy career in front of the whole family was breathtaking in its callousness. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but years of conditioning kept me silent. This was exactly why I'd stayed away for 3 years. Exactly why every interaction with my family left me feeling diminished and questioning my own worth. Jessica's job is very important, Dad, my mother said quietly, attempting to defend me in her gentle, non-confrontational way. I'm sure it keeps her busy, he replied dismissively, but at the end of the day, what has she actually accomplished? Mike's built a business, bought a house, started a family. He's contributing something real to the community. Ashley's building her brand and creating opportunities for their family. Even the boys are achieving things we can measure and celebrate. The implication was crystal clear. My work at NASA was somehow less real, less valuable, less worthy of recognition than selling cars and posting on Instagram. The fact that I was part of a program that would literally expand the boundaries of human civilization apparently counted for nothing in his estimation. Some things are harder to measure, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil churning inside me. Everything can be measured if it's worth measuring, he replied with the confidence of a man who'd never questioned his own perspective. Results are what matter. Practical results that improve people's lives. I thought about the thousands of technological innovations that had emerged from the space program, the scientific discoveries that had advanced human knowledge, the inspiration that space exploration provided to children around the world. But I also knew that trying to explain any of this would be pointless. My father had decided long ago that my chosen career was impractical and self-indulgent, and no amount of evidence would change his mind. Dad's right, Mike chimed in, sensing an opportunity to reinforce his favored status. At the end of the day, success is about building something lasting, contributing to your community, taking care of your family. Those are the things that really matter. His words were carefully chosen to highlight everything I supposedly lacked: a traditional family, local community involvement, tangible business achievements. It was a subtle but effective way of positioning himself as the successful child, while relegating me to the role of impractical dreamer. Everyone contributes in different ways, my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction, and the comment felt more like an obligatory defense than a genuine belief. Some contributions are more valuable than others, my father concluded, effectively ending any further discussion on the topic. The rest of the meal passed in relative silence, punctuated by safe conversations about weather, local news, and the boys' upcoming Christmas wishes. I found myself retreating emotionally, a survival mechanism I developed during childhood to protect myself from further hurt. The badge in my pocket felt heavier with each passing minute, representing not just my professional achievement but my complete disconnection from the people who should have been proudest of me. After dinner, while my mother and Ashley cleaned up in the kitchen, I found myself alone with my father and Mike in the living room. The television was tuned to a football game neither of them seemed particularly invested in, creating background noise for the kind of comfortable masculine silence they'd always shared. I felt like an intruder in their space, uncertain whether to attempt conversation or simply endure the awkwardness until I could politely excuse myself. "So what exactly do you do at NASA anyway?" Mike asked during a commercial break, his tone suggesting genuine curiosity mixed with skepticism. "I'm a flight dynamics officer," I explained, grateful for any opportunity to discuss my work even if the audience was less than ideal. I help calculate spacecraft trajectories, monitor orbital mechanics, and support mission operations. "That sounds complicated," he replied, in a way that somehow made complexity seem like a character flaw. "It's challenging, but that's what makes it interesting. We're working on some incredible projects right now." I hesitated, wondering if this might be an opening to share my news, but my father's response cut off that possibility. "Complicated doesn't necessarily mean important," he observed, not looking up from his beer. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. Take Mike's business, for example. Buy cars, sell cars, make money. Everyone understands it, everyone benefits, and it creates real value in the community. Space exploration creates value too, I said, unable to let his dismissal pass unchallenged. The technologies we develop benefit everyone. The scientific knowledge we gain advances human understanding. The inspiration we provide encourages young people to pursue careers in science and engineering. That's all very theoretical, my father replied, with the kind of patronizing patience he might use with a child explaining an elaborate imaginary game. Mike's business provides real jobs for real people. When someone needs a reliable vehicle, they know where to go. That's practical value. The comparison was so fundamentally unfair that I almost laughed. How do you explain the value of pushing the boundaries of human knowledge to someone who's decided that anything beyond their immediate experience is worthless? How do you defend the importance of long-term scientific advancement to people who only value immediate, tangible results? Different kinds of work serve different purposes, I said finally, recognizing that any further argument would be futile. Some purposes are more necessary than others, my father concluded, returning his attention to the game and effectively dismissing both me and my career in one sentence. I excused myself shortly after that exchange, claiming fatigue from travel, but actually needing space to process the emotional damage of the evening. My childhood bedroom had been converted into my mother's craft room years ago, but she'd set up an air mattress and made the space as welcoming as possible. Surrounded by her quilting supplies and photo albums, I lay awake replaying every conversation, every dismissive comment, every moment when I'd felt invisible despite being right there in the room. The badge seemed to pulse against my chest where I'd placed it on the nightstand, a tangible reminder of everything my family refused to acknowledge. Tomorrow would bring more of the same. Polite conversations that carefully avoided any real discussion of my life. Subtle comparisons that highlighted my supposed shortcomings, and the crushing weight of being fundamentally misunderstood by the people who should have known me best. But tomorrow would also bring opportunity. The chance to finally bridge the gap between perception and reality. The moment when I could show them exactly what their disappointment daughter had actually accomplished. The revelation that would either repair our relationship forever or confirm that it was irreparably broken. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking about the little girl who used to stare at the stars from this very house, dreaming of adventures beyond the horizon. That girl had grown up to achieve everything she'd ever imagined, and more. Tomorrow, it would be time for her family to meet the woman she'd become. The morning after Thanksgiving brought an unexpected visitor to our front door. I was helping my mother package leftovers in the kitchen when the doorbell rang, followed by the sound of my father's surprised greeting and an unfamiliar woman's voice. Through the window, I could see a sleek black sedan parked in our driveway, government plates clearly visible even from this distance. My heart began racing as I recognized the implications of that particular type of vehicle appearing at our family home. "Jessica, there's someone here to see you," my father called from the front hallway, his voice carrying a note of confusion and what might have been concern. In all the years I'd lived at home, no one had ever arrived specifically to see me in an official capacity, and certainly not in a government vehicle that suggested serious business. I walked to the front door to find Dr. Sarah Chen, my mission director from NASA, standing on our front porch looking every inch the accomplished professional she was. Dressed in a crisp navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase, she commanded immediate respect and attention. Behind her stood a man I didn't recognize, also in formal attire, with the bearing of someone accustomed to important responsibilities. "Dr. Chen," I said, unable to hide my surprise at seeing her here, hundreds of miles from Johnson Space Center, and in the absolute last place I would have expected NASA business to intrude on my personal life. "Jessica, I apologize for the unexpected visit, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention. This is Director Williams from NASA's Public Affairs Office. We need to discuss some urgent developments regarding the Mars mission announcement." My father stood beside me, his expression cycling through confusion, surprise, and what appeared to be growing alarm as he processed the implications of NASA officials arriving at his home to conduct business with his daughter. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had his complete and undivided attention. "Of course, please come in," I said, stepping aside to allow them entry while my mind raced through possible scenarios that could have prompted this visit. My mother appeared from the kitchen, still wearing her apron and looking flustered by the unexpected arrival of such obviously important visitors. "Can I offer you coffee? Or perhaps some breakfast? We have plenty of leftover turkey if you're hungry." "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you," Dr. Chen replied graciously, though her professional demeanor suggested this was far from a social call. We gathered in the formal living room, a space my family typically reserved for special occasions and important guests. My parents perched on the edge of the sofa, like nervous teenagers, meeting their daughter's boyfriend for the first time, while Dr. Chen and Director Williams took the chairs opposite them. The formality of the setting seemed to underscore the significance of whatever had brought them here. "I'll get straight to the point," Dr. Chen began, opening her briefcase and removing a folder thick with official documents. "We've had a security breach regarding the Mars mission crew announcements. Someone leaked preliminary information to the media, and we're now facing pressure to move up our official announcement timeline significantly." Director Williams took over the explanation. "The story is scheduled to break tomorrow morning on the front page of the Washington Post. We have roughly 18 hours before Jessica's selection for the Mars mission becomes international news, which means we need to conduct all necessary briefings and preparations immediately." I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications sank in. I had planned to tell my family about the Mars mission myself, in my own time and my own way. The idea of them learning about the most important achievement of my life through a newspaper article was horrifying. "What does this mean exactly?" my father asked, his voice carefully controlled in the way it became when he was processing information he didn't fully understand. "It means that your daughter is about to become one of the most famous people on the planet," Director Williams replied matter-of-factly. "The first human Mars mission is the biggest story of the decade, possibly the century. The crew members will be global celebrities overnight." My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock as she looked between me and the NASA officials. "Jessica is going to Mars? She's been selected as one of 6 crew members for the first human expedition to Mars," Dr. Chen confirmed, pride evident in her voice. "The mission launches in 18 months, and she'll be serving as the primary flight dynamics officer and backup mission commander. It's an extraordinary achievement, and an honor that very few people in human history will ever receive." The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, his expression unreadable but intense. My mother appeared to be struggling to process the magnitude of what she'd just learned, while I sat frozen in the middle of it all, watching my family grapple with news that redefined everything they thought they knew about my life and career. "When were you planning to tell us?" my father asked finally, his voice quiet but loaded with emotion I couldn't quite identify. "I was going to tell you yesterday, but the conversation never seemed to go in the right direction," I admitted, feeling suddenly defensive despite having done nothing wrong. "This is exactly why I kept it to myself. I knew you wouldn't understand the significance." "Not understand the significance?" my father repeated, his volume rising slightly. "My daughter is going to another planet, and you think I wouldn't understand the significance?" Dr. Chen intervened before the family discussion could escalate. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really do need to focus on the immediate practical concerns. Jessica, you'll need to return to Houston today for emergency media training. The announcement will include a live press conference tomorrow afternoon, followed by interviews with major networks throughout the week." "Today?" my mother interjected, looking stricken. "But she just got home. We haven't had any time together as a family." "I understand this is disruptive to your holiday plans," Director Williams said sympathetically, "but the media attention will be unprecedented. We need to make sure Jessica is prepared for the level of scrutiny she's about to face." As the adults discussed logistics and timelines around me, I found myself thinking about the cosmic irony of the situation. For years, my family had treated my NASA career as an expensive hobby, something I would eventually outgrow in favor of more practical pursuits. Now government officials were sitting in our living room explaining that I was about to become an international celebrity because of that same career they'd consistently dismissed. "What kind of media attention are we talking about?" my father asked, and I could see him beginning to understand that this development would affect the entire family, not just me. Think moon landing level coverage, Director Williams explained. Every major network, newspaper, and magazine in the world will want interviews. Social media will explode. There will be documentaries, book deals, movie rights negotiations. Jessica's face will be on magazine covers and billboards. The crew members will be treated like rock stars everywhere they go. My mother looked overwhelmed by the scope of what was being described. Will we need security? Will people come here looking for Jessica? That's certainly possible, Dr. Chen acknowledged. We'll provide guidance on managing media requests and protecting your privacy. But yes, there will likely be significant interest in Jessica's background, her family, her hometown. Clearwater, Texas is about to become a very famous place. I watched my father process this information, seeing him mentally calculate the implications for his business, his standing in the community, his entire carefully constructed life. The daughter he'd dismissed as impractical and unrealistic was about to bring more attention to their small town than it had ever received in its entire history. We should probably call Mike, my mother said suddenly, apparently realizing that this news would affect her other children as well. And your Aunt Karen will want to know. Oh my goodness, the church will be so excited. Pastor Johnson always talks about how God's plans are bigger than our own understanding. The mention of extended family and community reaction seemed to trigger something in my father's expression. I could almost see him reimagining conversations with friends and neighbors, recalculating his daughter's value in the social hierarchy of their small town. The woman he'd spent years diminishing was about to become the most famous person Clearwater had ever produced. Jessica, we need to discuss your personal security as well, Dr. Chen continued, consulting her notes. You'll be assigned a security detail starting next week. There are protocols for family protection that we'll need to implement. Security detail? I repeated, still struggling to fully comprehend how dramatically my life was about to change. The crew members become valuable assets the moment this announcement goes public, Director Williams explained. Foreign governments, terrorist organizations, obsessed fans, conspiracy theorists. There are numerous potential threats we need to consider. Your safety and the safety of your family becomes a national security priority. My father leaned forward in his chair, his businessman's instincts finally engaging with the conversation. What kind of support does NASA provide for families during this process? We have comprehensive programs in place, Dr. Chen assured him. Media training for family members who choose to participate, security consultations for your home and business, liaison services to help manage public requests and appearances. We understand that this affects everyone, not just Jessica. Business appearances? My father asked, and I could see the gears turning in his head as he considered the potential implications for Thompson Construction. There will likely be significant interest in Jessica's background and upbringing, Director Williams confirmed. Local businesses, schools, community organizations. Everyone will want to claim connection to the Mars mission. It can be beneficial for the community if managed properly. The irony was almost overwhelming. The same man who had spent yesterday's dinner explaining how my career created no real value was now learning that my achievements might actually boost his business and elevate his status in the community. The daughter he'd characterized as a disappointment was about to become his most valuable asset. I should probably pack, I said quietly, standing up as the reality of the situation finally sank in. My carefully planned family reconciliation had been derailed by forces completely beyond my control. But perhaps that was for the best. At least now there could be no question about the importance of my work, or the magnitude of my achievements. Jessica, wait, my father called as I headed toward the stairs. When I turned back, his expression was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, a mixture of pride, confusion, regret, and what might have been awe. I need to say something before you go. The room fell silent as everyone waited for him to continue. My mother watched nervously, probably worried about what tactless comment he might make in front of the NASA officials. I owe you an apology, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. I've spent years telling you that your dreams were impractical, that your career was a waste of time, that you needed to focus on more realistic goals. I was wrong. Not just wrong, I was completely, utterly wrong about everything. Dr. Chen and Director Williams exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing such a personal family moment, but neither moved to interrupt. Yesterday at dinner, I dismissed your job as fantasy. I compared your achievements unfavorably to selling cars and posting on social media. I made you feel small and unimportant in your own family home. He stood up slowly, moving toward me with hesitant steps. My daughter is going to Mars. My daughter is making history. My daughter is representing all of humanity in the greatest adventure our species has ever undertaken. And I've been too blind and stubborn to see it. Tears were flowing freely down my mother's face now, and even the NASA officials seemed moved by the unexpected emotional honesty of the moment. I don't know how to fix the years of damage I've caused, my father continued, but I want you to know that I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. You didn't need to prove anything to me or anyone else. You were always extraordinary. I was just too limited in my thinking to recognize it. The apology was more than I had ever expected to receive, but it also felt complicated by the circumstances. Would he have reached the same conclusion if NASA officials hadn't appeared at our door to explain my importance? Would my achievements have mattered to him if they hadn't come with the promise of media attention and community recognition? Dad, I began, but he held up his hand to stop me. Let me finish, please. I know this apology is coming too late and for the wrong reasons. I know you shouldn't have needed international recognition for me to see your value. But I also know that from this moment forward, I want to be the father you deserved all along. I want to learn about your work, understand your dreams, and support your achievements the way I should have been doing for years. My mother stood up and wrapped both of us in one of her encompassing hugs, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," over and over again through her tears. Dr. Chen cleared her throat gently, reminding us that time was still a factor despite the emotional breakthrough happening in our living room. Jessica, I hate to interrupt, but we really do need to get back to Houston for your preparations. Of course, I said, pulling back from my parents but feeling something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. Mom, Dad, I'll call you tonight after the briefings. We can talk more then. Will we be able to watch the press conference? My mother asked, already mentally planning how to organize viewing parties and celebration gatherings. It will be carried live on every major network, Director Williams assured her. NASA will also stream it on our website and social media channels. As I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave, my father approached me one more time. Jessica, I know I have no right to ask this after everything I've put you through, but would it be possible for your mother and me to attend the press conference? I'd like to be there to support you if you'll have us. The request surprised me, but it also felt like a genuine attempt to bridge the gap between us. I'll ask Dr. Chen if it's possible to arrange. We can certainly accommodate family members, Dr. Chen confirmed. In fact, it would be beneficial to have your parents there. The media will want to interview them as well. They'll want to interview us? My mother asked, looking both thrilled and terrified by the prospect. Absolutely, Director Williams replied. Everyone will want to know about Jessica's background, her upbringing, what influenced her to pursue aerospace engineering. You'll be an important part of the story. As we prepared to leave for the airport, I found myself marveling at how quickly everything had changed. 24 hours ago, I had been the family disappointment, the daughter whose career was too impractical to take seriously. Now I was about to become an international celebrity, and my parents were being invited to share in the spotlight they had never wanted to shine on my achievements. The drive to the airport gave me time to process the morning's revelations. My father's apology had been genuine, but it was impossible to ignore the fact that it had taken external validation for him to recognize my worth. Still, genuine growth and change had to start somewhere, and perhaps this crisis had created an opportunity for our relationship that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Dr. Chen spent the flight back to Houston briefing me on what to expect over the next few days. Media training, wardrobe consultations, background checks for family members who would be attending public events, security assessments for my parents' home and business. My entire life was about to be scrutinized and documented in ways I had never imagined when I first dreamed of becoming an astronaut. Are you ready for this? She asked as we began our descent into Houston. I thought about the little girl who had stared at the stars from her back porch in Clearwater, dreaming of adventures beyond the horizon. I thought about the young woman who had left for MIT despite her family's skepticism, determined to prove that dreams could become reality. I thought about the daughter who had finally received her father's recognition, even if it had taken a media leak and government officials to make it happen. "I've been ready my whole life," I replied, fingering the mission specialist badge that had started this entire journey. I just didn't know it would happen quite like this. The next morning, as I stood in front of the mirror in my Houston apartment preparing for the press conference that would change everything, I realized that sometimes the most important journeys begin not with careful planning, but with unexpected disruptions that force us to confront truths we've been avoiding. My family had finally seen me for who I really was, and now it was time for the rest of the world to meet the woman who was about to reach for Mars. Outside my window, the Johnson Space Center hummed with activity as preparations continued for the announcement that would make history. In a few hours, 6 names would be revealed to the world as the crew of the first human mission to Mars. My name would be among them, representing not just my own dreams and achievements, but the unlimited potential that exists when someone refuses to let other people's limitations define their possibilities. The badge sat on my dresser, no longer a secret but a symbol of everything that was about to begin. Tomorrow, children around the world would look up at the night sky and dream of following in my footsteps. Some of them would face the same skepticism and dismissal I had encountered, but maybe my story would help them remember that the stars are always worth reaching for, no matter what anyone else believes about the distance. The NASA Johnson Space Center press conference room buzzed with an energy I had never experienced before. Television crews from around the globe jockeyed for position, while photographers tested their equipment and reporters reviewed their notes one final time. The room that had hosted countless routine mission updates and technical briefings was now the epicenter of what would become one of the most watched press conferences in space exploration history. I stood behind the curtain with my 5 fellow crew members, each of us processing the magnitude of what was about to unfold in our own way. Commander Patricia Hayes, a veteran of 3 previous space missions, appeared calm and composed as always. Dr. Marcus Rivera, our chief scientist, was reviewing his notes for what seemed like the 100th time. Engineers Sarah Kim and David Chen were engaged in quiet conversation about the technical aspects they might be asked to discuss. Mission specialist Thomas Anderson stood silently, his expression focused and determined. Together, we represented the culmination of decades of preparation, training, and scientific advancement. In 18 months, we would leave Earth aboard the spacecraft Ares Pioneer and begin humanity's first journey to another planet. The weight of that responsibility was both exhilarating and terrifying. Through a gap in the curtain, I could see my parents sitting in the front row of the audience section. My father wore his best suit, the one he typically reserved for church services and business meetings, while my mother had chosen a navy blue dress that made her look elegant and proud. The transformation in their demeanor since yesterday morning was remarkable. Where once they had seemed uncomfortable and out of place when discussing my career, they now sat with the bearing of people who understood they were witnessing history. Mike and Ashley had driven down from Clearwater that morning, bringing Tyler and Connor to witness their aunt's moment in the spotlight. My nephews fidgeted in their seats, probably not fully understanding the significance of what was happening, but clearly excited by the atmosphere of importance that filled the room. Ashley had been documenting everything on her phone since arriving, no doubt preparing content for what would be her most popular social media posts ever. Even Aunt Karen had made the trip from Dallas, sitting beside my parents with tears already glistening in her eyes. She had always been my strongest family supporter, the one adult who never questioned my ambitions or suggested I should pursue more traditional paths. Seeing her there felt like having a piece of my childhood confidence restored. Dr. Chen approached our group with final instructions and encouragement. "Remember, this is your moment," she said, her voice carrying the authority that had guided our training for years. "You've earned this through talent, dedication, and countless hours of preparation. The world is about to meet 6 extraordinary individuals who represent the best of human achievement and potential." The countdown to the press conference felt surreal. In just minutes, my identity as Jessica Thompson from Clearwater, Texas would be permanently altered. I would become Jessica Thompson, Mars mission specialist, one of the first humans selected to travel to another planet. Everything I had worked towards since childhood was about to be acknowledged on the largest possible stage. As we prepared to take the stage, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The little girl who stared at stars from her back porch could never have imagined this scene. But she had possessed the same determination and curiosity that now propelled me toward Mars. Every obstacle overcome, every dismissive comment endured, every moment of self-doubt conquered, had been preparation for this day. The curtain parted, and we walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. Camera flashes erupted like lightning as photographers captured our first public appearance as the Mars crew. The room fell silent as NASA Administrator Jennifer Walsh approached the podium to begin the most anticipated announcement in space exploration since the Apollo program. "Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, distinguished guests," Administrator Walsh began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. "Today marks a pivotal moment in human history. After decades of preparation, technological advancement, and international cooperation, I am honored to introduce the 6 individuals who will represent all of humanity on our first crewed mission to Mars." The formal introduction process felt both eternal and instantaneous. Each crew member stepped forward as their name was called, providing brief remarks about their background, qualifications, and excitement for the mission ahead. When my turn came, I moved to the podium with steady steps despite the racing of my heart. "Dr. Jessica Thompson, Mission Specialist and Flight Dynamics Officer," Administrator Walsh announced. Dr. Thompson graduated summa cum laude from MIT with a degree in aerospace engineering and has served with distinction at NASA for 4 years. She will be responsible for navigation, orbital mechanics, and backup mission command duties. Looking out at the audience, I saw my father leaning forward in his seat, his expression a mixture of pride and amazement that I had never witnessed before. My mother was crying openly, her hand pressed to her mouth as she tried to maintain composure. The sight of their emotional reaction nearly overwhelmed me, but I managed to deliver my prepared remarks about the honor of selection and the importance of space exploration for humanity's future. The question-and-answer session that followed was intense and wide-ranging. Reporters asked about technical aspects of the mission, personal motivations for space exploration, family reactions to our selection, and the historical significance of becoming the first humans to visit Mars. Each question was an opportunity to represent not just myself, but the entire space program and the scientific community that had made this mission possible. "Dr. Thompson," called a reporter from CNN, "can you tell us about your family's reaction to your selection for this historic mission?" The question provided a perfect opportunity to acknowledge the people who had shaped my journey, including those who had initially doubted it. "My family has been incredibly supportive," I began, making eye contact with my parents in the audience. Like many families, they initially had concerns about the practical aspects of pursuing a career in space exploration, but they've come to understand that some dreams are worth pursuing regardless of how impossible they might seem to others. My father nodded slowly as I spoke, and I could see him processing the public acknowledgement of our complicated history alongside the recognition of our recent reconciliation. Another reporter asked about the personal sacrifices required for such an ambitious mission. "You'll be away from Earth for nearly 3 years," she noted. "How do you mentally prepare for that kind of separation from everything familiar?" "Space exploration has always required individuals willing to leave behind the comfortable and familiar, in pursuit of knowledge and discovery," I replied. "The 3 years we'll spend away from Earth represent an investment in humanity's future. When we return, we'll bring back scientific data, technological innovations, and insights that will benefit generations to come." The press conference continued for over an hour, with each crew member fielding questions about their expertise, backgrounds, and perspectives on the mission. Throughout the session, I found myself repeatedly glancing at my family, still somewhat amazed that they were there supporting me in such a public and meaningful way. When the formal proceedings concluded, we were immediately surrounded by individual interview requests and photo opportunities. The media attention was overwhelming in its intensity and scope, but also validating in ways I hadn't expected. Every question, every camera flash, every reporter's notebook represented acknowledgement that my work mattered, that my achievements were significant, that my dreams had been worth pursuing. During a brief break between interviews, my parents approached the media area where I was speaking with a journalist from Scientific American. My father waited patiently until the interview concluded, then stepped forward with an expression that mixed nervousness and determination. "Jessica," he said, his voice carrying clearly enough that nearby reporters began paying attention to our family interaction. "I wanted to say something publicly, if that's all right with you." I nodded, curious about what he felt compelled to share in such a visible setting. "Yesterday I made some comments about my daughter's career that I deeply regret," he began, addressing not just me but the assembled media representatives who had begun recording our conversation. "I called her work impractical and suggested that her achievements were less valuable than more traditional career paths. I was completely wrong, and I owe her and everyone who works in space exploration an apology." The reporters around us exchanged glances, recognizing the human interest value of a father publicly acknowledging his mistake about his daughter's extraordinary achievements. "Jessica has always been exceptional," my father continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "She showed remarkable intelligence and determination from an early age, but I was too limited in my thinking to recognize the value of her dreams. Today, seeing her on this stage, understanding the magnitude of what she's accomplished and what she's about to undertake, I realize that she's been preparing for this moment her entire life." He paused, taking a deep breath before delivering his final statement. "My daughter is going to Mars. She's representing not just our family or our community, but all of humanity in the greatest adventure our species has ever attempted. I couldn't be more proud, and I couldn't have been more wrong about the importance of reaching for the stars." The spontaneous apology became one of the most widely shared moments from the entire press conference. Video clips of my father's statement spread across social media platforms within hours, resonating with viewers who recognized the universal theme of family members learning to support each other's unconventional dreams. The days following the press conference passed in a whirlwind of interviews, photo shoots, and media appearances. My family returned to Clearwater to find their small town transformed into a destination for space enthusiasts and media crews. Thompson Construction received more attention and business inquiries in 1 week than it had generated in the previous 5 years combined. My father handled the newfound prominence with grace and humor, frequently redirecting conversations back to my achievements rather than capitalizing on his daughter's fame for business purposes. My mother became an inadvertent spokesperson for parents of children interested in STEM careers, fielding calls from reporters who wanted to understand how a small-town family had produced a Mars mission specialist. Her interviews revealed a woman who had always supported my dreams quietly, even when she lacked the confidence to advocate for them openly against my father's skepticism. Mike struggled initially with the dramatic shift in family dynamics, having spent decades as the acknowledged successful child only to watch his sister become internationally famous overnight. However, he eventually found his own way to contribute to the narrative, speaking eloquently about the importance of siblings supporting each other's different paths to success. Ashley leveraged her social media following to document our family's experience with characteristic enthusiasm, but she also used her platform to encourage young women to pursue careers in science and engineering. Her posts about her sister-in-law's achievements reached thousands of followers who might never have otherwise engaged with space exploration content. Even Tyler and Connor benefited from their aunt's sudden fame, becoming celebrities at their elementary school, and developing genuine interest in science and mathematics that their teachers attributed directly to having a family member involved in space exploration. The months leading up to mission launch were filled with intensive training, medical evaluations, psychological assessments, and technical preparations. My family visited Houston regularly, gradually becoming comfortable with the NASA environment and developing relationships with other crew families. The barriers that had once separated us dissolved as they gained understanding of my work, and I learned to appreciate their different perspectives on success and achievement. My father became particularly interested in the engineering challenges involved in Mars exploration, asking detailed questions about spacecraft design, life support systems, and mission logistics. His construction background provided him with relevant knowledge about project management and problem-solving that translated surprisingly well to space mission planning. For the first time in our lives, we found common ground in discussing technical challenges and innovative solutions. My mother channeled her natural nurturing instincts into learning about the psychological aspects of long-duration space missions, reading extensively about crew dynamics, stress management, and communication strategies. Her background in education proved valuable as she helped develop materials for school presentations about the Mars mission. The transformation in our relationship became complete during the final family dinner before my departure for pre-launch quarantine. Instead of awkward conversations about the weather and local news, we discussed orbital mechanics, planetary geology, and the scientific objectives of our mission. My achievements were no longer invisible or diminished. They were celebrated and understood as the culmination of lifelong dedication to expanding human knowledge and capability. "I keep thinking about something," my father said as we finished dessert. "All those years when you would lie on the back porch staring at the stars, I thought you were just daydreaming. I never imagined you were actually planning your future." "I probably wasn't consciously planning anything that specific," I admitted. "But I think some part of me always knew I wanted to be part of something bigger than what I could see from our backyard." "Well, you're certainly going to see things from our backyard that no human has ever seen before," my mother added, with a smile that mixed pride and worry in equal measure. The launch itself was a spectacle beyond anything I had imagined during my childhood dreams of space exploration. My family occupied a VIP viewing area along with other crew families, dignitaries, and media representatives from around the world. As I lay strapped into my seat aboard Ares Pioneer, going through final pre-launch procedures, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The little girl who had once been told her dreams were impractical was about to leave Earth's atmosphere bound for Mars. The daughter who had been dismissed as a disappointment was now representing humanity's boldest exploration initiative. The woman who had fought for recognition and respect had earned both on the grandest possible scale. As our spacecraft lifted off, carrying us away from Earth and toward the red planet that had captured human imagination for centuries, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because my story was ending, but because the most important chapter was just beginning. The badge that had once been my secret symbol of achievement was now displayed prominently on my mission suit, visible to the cameras that would document our historic journey. 18 months later, as I became the third human to set foot on Martian soil, I carried with me not just the hopes and dreams of billions of people on Earth, but the love and support of a family that had learned to see beyond their own limitations. The waste of space had found her place among the stars, proving that sometimes the most impossible dreams are simply the ones that take the longest to achieve. The red landscape of Mars stretched endlessly before us, a new frontier waiting to be explored and understood. As I planted the flag representing all of humanity on another world, I thought about every person who had ever been told their dreams were too big, too impractical, too impossible. This moment belonged to all of them, proof that the universe is vast enough to accommodate every ambitious soul willing to reach beyond the horizon. Back on Earth, in a small town in Texas, a construction worker named Robert Thompson watched his daughter make history and finally understood that some achievements are worth waiting a lifetime to recognize. The stars, it turned out, had been the right destination all along. The morning of our return to Earth marked the end of what would be remembered as humanity's greatest adventure. But for me, it represented something far more personal. As I gazed through the viewport of our spacecraft at the blue marble growing larger in our field of vision, I couldn't help but think about the girl who had once stared up at these same stars from a back porch in Clearwater, Texas. That girl could never have imagined she would one day be returning from Mars as an international hero, carrying with her samples of another world, and memories that would reshape human understanding of our place in the universe. The 18-month journey to Mars and our 6-month stay on the planet's surface had been everything I had dreamed it would be and more. We had conducted groundbreaking scientific research, established the foundation for future human settlements, and proven that humanity was ready to become a multiplanetary species. But perhaps most importantly for me personally, every day of that mission had been a vindication of every choice I had made, every dream I had pursued despite opposition, and every moment I had refused to let other people's limitations define my possibilities. Our communications with Earth throughout the mission had been carefully managed and monitored, but my family had been granted regular contact sessions that had become the highlight of my weeks. Watching my father's transformation over those months had been almost as remarkable as watching the Martian sunrise each morning. The man who had once dismissed my career as impractical fantasy had become one of NASA's most enthusiastic advocates, giving interviews to local media about the importance of space exploration and encouraging young people in Clearwater to pursue careers in science and engineering. My mother had channeled her natural teaching instincts into developing educational programs about Mars exploration for elementary schools throughout Texas. She worked with NASA's Education Outreach Division to create curriculum materials that made complex scientific concepts accessible to young students, helping to inspire the next generation of space explorers. Her classroom had become a shrine to our mission, filled with photographs, mission updates, and student projects about Mars. Mike had surprised everyone, including himself, by discovering a passion for aerospace business development. He had transitioned from selling cars to representing companies that supplied equipment and services to NASA contractors, leveraging his family connection to space exploration into a thriving career that finally seemed to fulfill him in ways his previous work never had. His success in this new field had given him a deeper appreciation for the technical complexities of space missions, and a genuine respect for the work I had dedicated my life to pursuing. Even Ashley had found her niche in the space community, using her social media platform to humanize space exploration and make it accessible to audiences who might otherwise feel disconnected from scientific endeavors. Her posts about our family's experience had reached millions of followers, inspiring countless young women to consider careers in STEM fields and helping to broaden public support for space exploration funding. Tyler and Connor had become minor celebrities in their own right, known throughout their school district as the nephews of the Mars explorer. Both boys had developed serious interests in science and mathematics, with Tyler expressing ambitions to become an astronaut himself, and Connor fascinated by the engineering challenges of spacecraft design. Their enthusiasm for learning had spread to their classmates, creating a ripple effect of scientific curiosity that their teachers attributed directly to having a family member involved in space exploration. As our spacecraft completed its final approach to Earth, I reflected on how profoundly the mission had changed not just scientific understanding, but also the trajectory of my family's relationships and individual lives. The daughter who had once been seen as the family disappointment had become the catalyst for everyone discovering new passions and purposes. My achievement had elevated not just my own status, but had created opportunities and recognition for everyone connected to me. The re-entry process was intense and technically demanding, requiring absolute focus on spacecraft systems and landing procedures. As we descended through Earth's atmosphere, I felt the familiar weight of gravity returning to my body after months of Martian conditions. The sensation was both comforting and strange, a physical reminder that I was truly returning home after an experience that had fundamentally changed my perspective on what home meant. The landing was flawless, touching down at Edwards Air Force Base in California to a reception unlike anything in the history of space exploration. Thousands of people had gathered to witness our return, including world leaders, celebrities, scientists, and ordinary citizens who had followed our mission with passionate interest. The crowd erupted in cheers as our spacecraft's hatch opened and we emerged, blinking in the brilliant sunshine of our home planet. My family stood in the VIP section, tears streaming down their faces as they watched me take my first steps on Earth after becoming one of the first humans to walk on Mars. The sight of them there, proud and supportive, was more meaningful to me than all the scientific accolades and media attention combined. This was the homecoming I had dreamed of. Not just returning from space, but returning to a family that finally understood and celebrated who I had become. The immediate aftermath of our return was a whirlwind of medical evaluations, debriefings, and media appearances. NASA wanted to ensure our physical and psychological health after the long mission, while the global media clamored for exclusive interviews and behind-the-scenes access to the returning heroes. Every major network, newspaper, and magazine wanted to tell our story, particularly focusing on the human interest aspects of how the mission had affected our families and communities. During one particularly memorable interview with 60 Minutes, the reporter asked my father about his previous skepticism regarding my career choices. His response had become one of the most quoted statements from the entire mission coverage. "I spent years telling my daughter that her dreams were too big, too impractical, too far removed from reality," he said, looking directly into the camera with the sincerity that had characterized his transformation. What I failed to understand was that reality is bigger than what we can see from our own limited perspective. Jessica didn't need to change her dreams to fit my understanding of what was possible. I needed to expand my understanding to match the scope of her dreams. The interview had been watched by over 50 million people and had become required viewing in leadership and communication courses at universities around the world. My father's willingness to publicly acknowledge his mistakes and growth had resonated with parents everywhere, who recognized their own struggles with supporting children whose ambitions extended beyond familiar boundaries. The scientific data we had collected on Mars was already revolutionizing understanding of planetary geology, atmospheric science, and the potential for past or present life on other worlds. Our samples were being analyzed by researchers at institutions globally, each discovery adding to the foundation of knowledge that would guide future missions and eventually support permanent human settlement on Mars. But beyond the scientific achievements, our mission had accomplished something equally important in terms of human inspiration and aspiration. Children around the world were enrolling in science and mathematics programs in unprecedented numbers. University applications for aerospace engineering and related fields had increased by over 300%. Space agencies in dozens of countries were announcing ambitious new exploration initiatives, inspired by the success of our mission and the global enthusiasm it had generated. The presidential ceremony held in our honor at the White House was attended by dignitaries from around the world, including heads of state who wanted to be associated with this historic achievement. As the president placed the Congressional Gold Medal around my neck, I thought about every moment of doubt I had experienced, every time I had questioned whether the sacrifices were worth the pursuit of such an ambitious goal. Dr. Thompson, the president said during her remarks, "You and your crewmates have not only advanced human knowledge and capability, but you have demonstrated that the biggest barriers to achievement exist not in the vastness of space, but in the limitations of our own imagination." Standing on the stage in the East Room of the White House, wearing the highest civilian honor our nation could bestow, I felt the weight of representation that came with my position. I wasn't just being honored for my individual achievements, but as a symbol of what becomes possible when people refuse to accept other people's definitions of what they can accomplish. My return to Clearwater for the town's celebration was perhaps the most emotionally meaningful part of the entire homecoming experience. The community that had once seen me as an oddity, the girl whose interests didn't fit the local definition of practical success, had transformed their entire identity around my achievements. The water tower had been painted with "Home of Mars explorer Jessica Thompson," and Main Street was lined with banners celebrating our mission. The high school had established the Jessica Thompson STEM Excellence Program, providing scholarships and mentorship for students interested in pursuing careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The program had already attracted national attention and funding from major aerospace companies, ensuring that future generations of Clearwater students would have opportunities to pursue ambitious educational goals regardless of their family's financial circumstances. Mrs. Rodriguez, my former physics teacher who had first encouraged my scientific interests, was now the program director. During the celebration ceremony, she spoke about the importance of educators recognizing and nurturing unconventional talents, even when those talents point students toward paths that seem impossible from a small-town perspective. Jessica showed us that our job as teachers isn't to help students fit into the world as it exists, she said, but to prepare them to create the world as it could be. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a statue in the town square, depicting a young girl looking up at the stars while holding a model rocket. The inscription read, "Dream beyond the horizon, in honor of Jessica Thompson and all who dare to reach for the stars." The statue was designed to inspire future generations of children to pursue their own impossible dreams, regardless of how impractical they might seem to the adults around them. As I stood before that statue, surrounded by my family and the community that had watched me grow up, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The path from that back porch stargazer to Mars explorer had been filled with obstacles, setbacks, and moments of profound doubt. But every challenge had ultimately strengthened my resolve and deepened my appreciation for the dreams that drive human achievement. My father approached me as the crowd began to disperse, carrying a small wrapped package that he handed to me with characteristic awkwardness around emotional gestures. "I wanted to give you something," he said quietly. "Something I should have given you years ago." Inside the package was a framed photograph of me at age 8, lying on our back porch with a homemade telescope pointed toward the night sky. I had no memory of the picture being taken, but the image perfectly captured the sense of wonder and determination that had guided my entire life. "I found this in your mother's photo albums," he explained. "She kept it all these years, even when I was telling you to focus on more practical things. She knew, even when I didn't, that you were already becoming exactly who you were meant to be." The photograph became one of my most treasured possessions, a reminder that dreams often begin in the most ordinary moments and grow through the persistent nurturing of those who believe in possibilities others cannot see. The months following our return were filled with opportunities that would have seemed impossible during my childhood in Clearwater. Book deals, movie rights, speaking engagements, university appointments, and consulting opportunities with aerospace companies around the world. Each opportunity represented not just personal success, but validation of the choices I had made, despite opposition and skepticism. I established the Reach for the Stars Foundation, dedicated to supporting young people from small towns and underrepresented communities who wanted to pursue careers in space exploration and related fields. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and educational resources designed to ensure that zip code and family background would never again limit a young person's ability to reach for their dreams. My first book, From Clearwater to Mars, A Journey Beyond Limitations, became an international bestseller and required reading in leadership courses at business schools and military academies. The book detailed not just the technical aspects of space exploration, but the personal journey of overcoming family skepticism, community limitations, and self-doubt to achieve something that had once seemed impossible. During book tours and speaking engagements, I encountered thousands of young people who shared stories remarkably similar to my own. Children whose families didn't understand their scientific interests. Teenagers whose communities saw their ambitions as impractical or unrealistic. Young adults who had been told to pursue more traditional paths to success. Each conversation reinforced my commitment to ensuring that future generations would have better support systems for pursuing unconventional dreams. The most meaningful speaking engagement came when I returned to MIT to deliver the commencement address to graduating seniors. Standing at the podium, where I had once sat as an uncertain freshman, I looked out at faces filled with the same mixture of excitement and anxiety I had felt at their age. "You are graduating into a world that needs your biggest dreams, your wildest ambitions, your most impossible goals," I told them. "Don't let anyone convince you that practical is better than possible. Don't let anyone tell you that your vision is too large for the space you're supposed to occupy. The universe is vast enough to accommodate every ambitious soul willing to reach beyond the horizon." The speech was viewed millions of times online and became a rallying cry for young people around the world who were struggling to pursue dreams that others considered impractical or impossible. 5 years after our return from Mars, I was selected to command the first permanent human settlement mission to the Red Planet. The technology and infrastructure we had established during our initial mission had been expanded and improved, creating the foundation for a sustainable human presence on another world. This time, we wouldn't just be visiting Mars, we would be staying to build humanity's first extraterrestrial civilization. My family gathered once again to watch my departure, but this time the mood was different. Instead of the anxiety and uncertainty that had characterized my first launch, there was excitement and pride. They understood now that this wasn't about leaving them behind, but about representing them and all of humanity in the greatest adventure our species had ever undertaken. My father, now in his late 60s but still vigorous and engaged, had become one of NASA's most effective advocates for space exploration funding. He testified before Congress about the economic benefits of aerospace investment, and spoke at engineering conferences about the importance of supporting ambitious research and development initiatives. "My daughter taught me that the most practical thing you can do is pursue the impossible," he would tell audiences. "Every technology we take for granted today was once someone's impossible dream. The people who reach for the stars are the ones who bring the future back down to Earth for all of us to benefit from." As my spacecraft lifted off for my second journey to Mars, this time carrying the equipment and supplies needed to establish a permanent human outpost, I carried with me not just the hopes of billions of people on Earth, but but the deep satisfaction of having proven that dreams are never too big when they're backed by determination, preparation, and the courage to persist despite opposition. The little girl who had once been called a waste of space was now leading humanity's expansion into the cosmos, proving that sometimes the most important journeys begin not with a rocket launch, but with the simple act of looking up at the stars and believing that impossible is just another word for not yet achieved. From the surface of Mars, where I now serve as commander of humanity's first permanent extraterrestrial settlement, I often think about that Thanksgiving dinner, where my father's cruel words had finally pushed me to reveal the truth about my achievements. What seemed like the lowest moment in our relationship had actually been the catalyst for the most meaningful transformation any of us had ever experienced. The badge that had once been hidden in my pocket now sits proudly displayed in the common area of our Mars habitat, inspiring the next generation of space explorers who are already planning missions to the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The waste of space had found her place among the stars, and in doing so had helped clear the path for countless others to follow. 10 years had passed since I first set foot on Martian soil, and the Red Planet had become more than just my workplace or my temporary home. It had become the foundation of humanity's future among the stars, and I had been privileged to serve as its architect and guardian. The settlement we had built from nothing now housed over 200 permanent residents, scientists, engineers, and support staff from dozens of countries who had come together to prove that human civilization could thrive beyond Earth. Standing in the observation deck of New Olympus, our primary research facility, I watched the Earth rise over the Martian horizon, a brilliant blue dot suspended in the black infinity of space. The sight never lost its power to move me, reminding me of the fragile beauty of our homeworld and the incredible journey that had brought humanity to this moment. From this vantage point, the petty conflicts and divisions that seemed so important on Earth appeared insignificant compared to the vast cosmos that surrounded us. My daily routine on Mars had settled into a rhythm that would have seemed like science fiction to the girl who once dreamed on her back porch in Clearwater. Each morning began with communications briefings from Earth, updates on supply missions, scientific research reports, and the endless stream of administrative decisions required to keep a complex human settlement functioning millions of miles from home. The responsibility was enormous, but it was exactly the kind of challenge I had spent my entire life preparing to meet. The communication session I was preparing for today was particularly special because it marked the 10th anniversary of our first landing on Mars. NASA had arranged a live broadcast that would connect our settlement with celebrations happening simultaneously in cities around the world. My family would be gathered at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, along with thousands of other families whose children had been inspired by our mission to pursue careers in space exploration. The transformation in my family over the past decade had been as remarkable as the technological achievements we had accomplished on Mars. My father had become something I never could have imagined during my childhood. A passionate advocate for space exploration who spoke regularly at engineering conferences and educational events about the importance of supporting ambitious dreams. His construction company had evolved into a specialized contractor for aerospace facilities, building training centers and research laboratories for NASA and private space companies. My mother had written 3 books about the family experience of having a daughter in space, including a best-selling guide for parents of children interested in STEM careers. Her classroom teaching had evolved into a consulting practice that helped schools around the world develop programs to encourage scientific curiosity and critical thinking. She had become a sought-after speaker at educational conferences, sharing insights about how to nurture unconventional talents and support children whose dreams extend beyond traditional boundaries. Mike had surprised everyone, including himself, by discovering a talent for aerospace business development that had led to a successful career representing companies that supplied equipment and services to space missions. His understanding of both practical business concerns and the technical requirements of space exploration had made him valuable to organizations trying to bridge the gap between Earth-based industry and the emerging space economy. His success in this field had given him a perspective on achievement that valued innovation and risk-taking in ways his previous career never had. Ashley had transformed her social media platform into a powerful educational tool, documenting the daily lives of space families and making the human side of space exploration accessible to millions of followers worldwide. Her content had inspired countless young women to consider careers in science and engineering, and she had parlayed her influence into a successful production company that created educational documentaries about space exploration. Tyler and Connor, now teenagers, had both chosen to attend the specialized STEM high school that had been established in Clearwater, partly as a result of my achievements. Tyler was preparing to apply to the Air Force Academy with ambitions of becoming a pilot and eventually an astronaut, while Connor had developed a passion for robotics and artificial intelligence that he planned to pursue through MIT's engineering program. Both boys had inherited the family's newfound appreciation for ambitious goals and unconventional career paths. The live broadcast began with footage of celebrations in major cities around the world. Crowds of people gathered in public squares and science museums to commemorate the anniversary of humanity's first permanent settlement on another planet. The images were breathtaking. Children in Tokyo building model rockets, students in London conducting science experiments, families in Sao Paulo watching documentaries about Mars exploration, and elderly couples in Paris sharing memories of watching our original landing on television. When the camera switched to our settlement on Mars, I found myself looking out at an audience of billions of people who had followed our journey with passionate interest. The moment felt both intimate and overwhelming, a chance to share not just scientific achievements, but the personal story of how dreams become reality when they're backed by determination and preparation. "Good evening, Earth," I began, the greeting that had become traditional for our anniversary broadcasts. 10 years ago today, 6 human beings took their first steps on the surface of Mars, beginning humanity's greatest adventure. What we've accomplished since then has exceeded even our most optimistic projections. But the real success of this mission isn't measured in scientific discoveries or technological innovations. It's measured in the dreams we've inspired and the possibilities we've proven exist for anyone willing to reach beyond the horizon. The broadcast included a virtual tour of our settlement, showing the laboratories where we conducted groundbreaking research into planetary geology and atmospheric science, the agricultural domes where we grew food using Martian soil and carefully managed environmental systems, and the living quarters where humans from around the world had created a genuine community millions of miles from their birthplaces. One of the most moving segments featured video messages from young people around the world who had been inspired by our mission to pursue careers in science and engineering. A teenage girl from rural Kenya spoke about her plans to study aerospace engineering and eventually join future Mars missions. A young man from a small town in Brazil described how watching our broadcasts had motivated him to excel in mathematics and physics. Children from dozens of countries shared drawings of spaceships and planets, their artwork reflecting dreams that extended far beyond the boundaries of their immediate circumstances. The personal portion of the broadcast focused on how the mission had affected not just the crew members but our families and communities back on Earth. My father appeared on screen from the Johnson Space Center, his appearance more distinguished than I remembered, but his expression radiating the pride and confidence that had characterized his transformation over the past decade. 10 years ago, I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life, he said, speaking directly to the camera with the honesty that had become his trademark. I told my daughter that her dreams were impractical, that her career was a waste of time, that she needed to focus on more realistic goals. I was wrong about everything, and I've spent the past 10 years trying to make up for that mistake by encouraging other parents to support their children's biggest dreams. He paused, looking directly into the camera as if he could see me across the millions of miles that separated us. "Jessica, you've proven that the only limitations that really matter are the ones we accept for ourselves. You've shown the world that practical is just another word for small-minded, and that the biggest risks come from not taking any risks at all." My mother followed with her own message, reading from a letter she had written to the girl I had been at 8 years old, lying on our back porch and staring at the stars. The letter was a beautiful reflection on the importance of nurturing children's curiosity and supporting their ambitions, even when those ambitions seem impossible to achieve. "Dear Jessica," she read, her voice steady but emotional. "You don't know me yet, but I'm the woman you'll become when you learn to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you right now. Keep looking at those stars, sweetheart. Keep asking questions about how things work and dreaming about places you want to explore. The adults around you might tell you to be more practical, but don't listen to them. The world needs dreamers who refuse to accept limitations. The broadcast continued with updates from Clearwater, which had been transformed from a small Texas town into an international destination for space enthusiasts and educational tourists. The Jessica Thompson Space Center had been built where our old high school used to stand, featuring interactive exhibits about Mars exploration, a planetarium that took visitors on virtual journeys through the solar system, and research facilities where students from around the world came to study aerospace engineering and planetary science. Mrs. Rodriguez, now in her 70s but still passionate about science education, served as the center's director. During her segment of the broadcast, she spoke about the importance of recognizing and nurturing unconventional talents, particularly in students whose interests don't align with traditional community expectations. Jessica taught us that our job as educators isn't to help students fit into the world as it exists, she said, echoing words she had spoken many times over the years. Our job is to prepare them to create the world as it could be. Every child who looks up at the night sky and wonders what's out there has the potential to expand human knowledge and capability. We just need to give them the tools and encouragement to pursue those questions wherever they lead. The scientific achievements of our Mars settlement were highlighted in detail, including discoveries that had revolutionized understanding of planetary formation, atmospheric evolution, and the potential for life on other worlds. Our research had led to breakthrough technologies in life support systems, sustainable agriculture, and resource utilization that were already being applied to environmental challenges on Earth. The settlement had become a proving ground for innovations that would benefit both space exploration and terrestrial applications. Perhaps most importantly, our success had inspired a new generation of space missions and exploration initiatives. 3 additional Mars settlements were under construction by international consortiums. Lunar bases were being established to serve as stepping stones for deeper space exploration, and robotic missions were already on their way to the moons of Jupiter and Saturn to scout locations for future human outposts. The broadcast included an announcement that had been kept secret until this moment. I had been selected to command the first human mission to Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, where subsurface oceans might harbor life unlike anything found on Earth. The mission would launch in 5 years, representing the next phase of humanity's expansion into the solar system, and my own continuing journey as an explorer of impossible frontiers. The news was met with cheers from the Earth-based audience and surprised reactions from my fellow Mars residents, who had known I was being considered for future missions, but hadn't been told about the final selection. The Europa mission would be even more challenging than Mars exploration, requiring new technologies and longer journey times, but it also represented the ultimate validation of everything we had accomplished since that first tentative step onto Martian soil. As the broadcast neared its conclusion, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The path from that back porch in Clearwater to commanding humanity's first permanent extraterrestrial settlement had been filled with obstacles, setbacks, and moments of profound doubt. But every challenge had ultimately strengthened my resolve and deepened my appreciation for the dreams that drive human achievement. The girl who had once been dismissed as a waste of space was now preparing to lead humanity's first mission to a moon of Jupiter, continuing a journey of exploration that had already exceeded every expectation. The hidden NASA badge that had once represented my secret achievements was now displayed prominently in our settlement's museum, inspiring the next generation of explorers who were already planning missions to the outer planets and beyond. During the final segment of the broadcast, I addressed directly the young people around the world who might be struggling with families or communities that didn't understand their dreams. My message was simple but heartfelt. The universe is vast enough to accommodate every ambitious soul willing to reach beyond the horizon. To every child who has ever been told their dreams are too big, too impractical, too far removed from reality, I want you to know that those limitations exist only in the minds of people who have forgotten how to dream. I said, looking directly into the camera. The stars are not unreachable destinations. They're invitations to discover what becomes possible when you refuse to accept other people's definitions of what you can accomplish. I paused, thinking about my father's words from that painful Thanksgiving dinner so many years ago, and how completely our relationship had been transformed by the journey that followed. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who teach us the most important lessons about ourselves. My father once told me I was a waste of space, and in a way, he was right. I was wasting the space between Earth and Mars by not being there yet, but now I am here, and soon I'll be exploring the space around Jupiter, proving that even cruel words can become fuel for incredible achievements when they're used to power determination rather than defeat dreams. The broadcast concluded with images of our settlement under the Martian night sky, Earth visible as a bright star in the distance, and the promise that humanity's greatest adventures were still ahead of us. As the cameras stopped rolling and normal communications resumed, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction about the story we had shared with the world. Later that evening, during my private communications session with my family, my father appeared on screen looking older but more content than I had ever seen him. The man who had once struggled to understand my dreams had become their most passionate advocate, and the transformation had given him a sense of purpose that extended far beyond his previous concerns with practical success. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his voice carrying the wisdom that had come with age and experience. "All those years when I was telling you to be more realistic, I was really telling you to be more like me. I couldn't imagine possibilities beyond what I had experienced, so I tried to limit you to what I could understand. The greatest gift you gave me wasn't proving me wrong about your capabilities. It was teaching me that my own limitations didn't have to become yours." He paused, looking directly into the camera with the emotional honesty that had characterized his growth over the past decade. "You've given me a front-row seat to watch the impossible become inevitable. Every day since you left for Mars, I've learned something new about what human beings can accomplish when they refuse to accept the boundaries other people try to set for them. You've made me a better father, a better businessman, and a better person by showing me that practical is just another word for unimaginative." My mother joined the conversation, sharing updates about the educational programs she had developed and the thousands of young people who had been inspired by our family's story to pursue their own ambitious dreams. Her work had become a testament to the importance of supporting children's curiosity and helping them develop the confidence to pursue unconventional paths to success. "I keep meeting parents who tell me their children want to be astronauts or scientists or engineers," she said, her voice filled with pride. "They ask me how to handle those impractical dreams, and I tell them the same thing every time. The most practical thing you can do is help your child reach for the stars. You never know which one of them might actually grab one and bring it home for all of us to benefit from." The conversation lasted for over an hour, covering everything from technical aspects of the Europa mission to family news and memories of my childhood in Clearwater. The distance between Mars and Earth had never felt smaller, connected as we were by love, understanding, and shared pride in how far we had all come since that painful Thanksgiving dinner that had started everything. As I ended the communication session and prepared for sleep in my quarters overlooking the Martian landscape, I thought about the girl who had once stared at the stars from her back porch and wondered if she would ever touch them. That girl had not only touched the stars, she had made her home among them and was preparing to venture even further into the cosmic frontier. The badge that had once been hidden in my pocket was now visible to anyone who visited our settlement museum, a symbol of the journey from secret achievements to global recognition. But more importantly, it had become a reminder that every impossible dream is simply an achievement, waiting for someone brave enough to pursue it, despite opposition, skepticism, and temporary setbacks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new preparations for the Europa mission that would take humanity even further into the unknown. But tonight, as I drifted off to sleep under the alien stars of Mars, I felt the deep satisfaction of having lived a life guided by dreams rather than limitations, and having proven that the greatest waste of space is the unused potential that exists in every person who has ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what might be possible. The little girl from Clearwater, Texas, had indeed become a waste of space, claiming territory throughout the solar system and clearing the path for countless others to follow. Sometimes the cruelest words become the greatest motivations, and sometimes the most impossible dreams are simply the ones that take the longest to achieve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.